PowerPoint.
I'll see it, John.
Do you see it okay?
Yep.
It's changing slides?
Yep. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. So there's a fairly small group of us. So anytime anybody has a question, you feel free to just interrupt me. I want to make sure people get as much out of it as possible. And so kind of the premise of the workshop is sort of trying to demystify the entrepreneurial process. And so the prompt is, wouldn't it be amazing if you could start a successful business or NGO or not-for-profit organization in a few simple steps? And my belief is that often we overcomplicate things that should be really simple. The complicated part is solving these problems. Our tactics to get there should be simple. And so when you think about entrepreneurship, it really falls into this really uh, simple definition, but it captures the core of what entrepreneurship is. So there's an innovation. You have to be able to develop something new and novel to solve a problem. And the second part of it is commercialization, the proof of concept. Somebody other than your mother has to buy the product. And so innovation plus commercialization is entrepreneurship. As we look at the scope of the problem, I teach entrepreneurship, and we do research on this, and that when you survey the population, 70% of the people want to be entrepreneurs. When you just ask them, do you want to be an entrepreneur? 70% of people say yes. But the research shows actually fewer than 2% do. And so there's a real disconnect between the number of people that want to be entrepreneurs and the number of people that actually do. And so we see a growth of all this programming to help people become entrepreneurs, but it tends not to help people actually become more entrepreneurs. And then when you look at the reasoning behind it, so when you're asking them, why aren't you being an entrepreneur? The three top reasons fall into the reasons fall into these basic buckets. There's a focus on, I don't have enough money. And as you ask them follow-up questions, they lack knowledge and confidence. So they have these great ideas, but they feel either insufficient or they really are insufficient. And the third one I often ask people is, how much time are you actually spending on these projects? And they'll say, oh, I don't have time. I've come up with the idea, and the idea, I want you to find someone to implement it because it's such a great idea. And so I believe that paradigm is switched, and that if you spend the time, you build the knowledge, and the money or success will come. And so we want to focus on changing the discussion about what you need to start a successful business. And so really the agenda I'm going to look at is how to start a successful business. And I'm going to introduce this DYME framework that'll help you develop ideas into viable business opportunities. Why I'm here. I'm a professor that helps entrepreneurs start successful businesses so that you can have a positive impact in the society. You can build a business that lifts yourself and your families out of poverty. You get to fill in what you want to do with that business that you start. My goal is to help you start a successful business. And so I'm a professor at Clark University, and I teach in the graduate program at Harvard University in the certificate in creativity and innovation. I started my own business as an undergrad, and I sold it after 21 years. And then I transitioned into academia. I went and did my master's at the London School of Economics and my doctorate. And the idea is I wanted to understand the entrepreneurial process. And so right now, the DYME Institute works with over 40 universities and entrepreneurship centers around the world, helping improve the quality of entrepreneurship education. And so when you're looking at the business life cycle, this is Rogers' diffusion of innovation. You start with an idea, and over time, if it's successful, it grows, and then that business, if it doesn't adapt to the changes, will decline. And so if you recall, the people in the US, Sears used to be the largest company in the world, right? It got replaced. Walmart came in with a better model, and Sears went down, and then Walmart came up. And so the entrepreneurs that come to see me are fall into three categories. The nascent entrepreneurs that are here that have an idea but are afraid to start. I also get the vampire entrepreneurs. Those are the entrepreneurs who had an idea, bet all their money on it, have run out of money. That's why they're vampires. They're looking for more money. When there's an entrepreneur always talking about money, run away. They have wasted their money and now they want to waste yours. They haven't been disciplined with their money and they're not going to be disciplined with yours. And then the third type of entrepreneur is I see these zombie entrepreneurs, people that have run businesses for 5, 10 years and then the economy has changed, things aren't going well, and there's a slow decline. And unless they incorporate creativity and innovation into their business, they will go the way of the dodo bird. They will fail. And so, interestingly enough, I have a meeting this afternoon with one of these zombie entrepreneurs here in Worcester who's had a business and they can't figure out why they're not making any money anymore. And so, back to the sense of money. If I had more money, I would be successful. It's always the discourse that people say to me. But we know from the research that more money doesn't lead to success. In fact, resource scarcity, not enough money, not enough time, not enough skills is what makes successful entrepreneurs. And so we want people that lack resources, lack the ability, because then they have to figure these things out with their time. And, the Small Business Administration asked me to do a workshop on how to start a business. And I said, no, I want to help people start successful businesses, which is completely different. For $69, you can go downtown Worcester and register a business and invest all your money, and chances are it's going to fail. And so the belief is, and we teach this a lot through at universities, and I see this in a lot of the co-working spaces and in the discourse, is shoot for the moon. If you miss, you can hit the stars. Follow your dreams. Do something you're passionate about. And that's sort of the discourse about, I have a lot of people come in with their passion projects. It's all a lie. It makes great reality TV, but it doesn't make great reality. And so Shark Tank is a wonderful TV show. It's very entertaining, but they're selling something that isn't really how they started. So Damon John started making hats in the basement of his mother's house with her sewing machine and selling them in the neighborhood for $10. That's how Damon John started. So if you want to be successful, dream small. And I'm going to present a couple case studies on that. Further, like I said, I'm a professor, I teach entrepreneurship. The research is really clear. The more you dream big, the less likely you are to do it. And so from a psychological point of view, what is happening is the more time someone spends imagining the ideal outcome, the less likely they are to be successful. And so really what's happening is you are dreaming about being successful and all the benefits of that success. And what from a psychological or neurological level happening is you're getting the dopamine rush. You're feeling happy about being successful. And so when you face the reality of the hard work of actually being an entrepreneur, people revert back to their imagined reality, because you can be successful and have the dopamine rush without actually having to do the work. The second thing that's happening in this digital age is that the digital spaces are also positive in that we're getting this dopamine rush without actually doing any work. We're passive consumers of successes. And so it becomes much harder for us to face the concrete challenges of actually implementing our idea. And so from the business side of it, the more detailed the business plan is, the more likely it is to fail. And what I think or the person isn't going to start. So what I think happens there is that and I've seen this in my practice, is that people come in and will say, well, the customer doesn't understand. I wrote this wonderful business plan and the customer's not aligning with it. And so therefore they're wrong. And if the customer doesn't understand the value creation, why are we going to buy the product? The second thing that I think happens is that the more planning we do, the worse we feel about our abilities to implement it. So nothing against the SBDC, but they will tell you that you need $250,000 to start a business in the US. So if you don't have $250,000 and you don't have the marketing material, you've created this wonderful plan, but you've identified everything you lack. And so you're paralyzed because you don't feel sufficient with your idea to implement that. And so in summary, as you're thinking about moving forward, you want to dream small, don't plan, and you don't need a lot of money. So entrepreneurs do tactical planning, not strategic planning, not a 5-year business plan, but what are we going to do this week to get the project moving? So if it's not formal planning and pitch decks and pitch deck competitions and angel investors, what's left for entrepreneurs to actually develop their ideas and move forward? And so as I think about it, what we're looking at is we can focus on how it ought to be done, or we can actually focus on how it's actually done. And so in reality, entrepreneurs, when they initially start, fewer than 1% actually write a business plan. 99% self-fund and use friends, families, and fools. And really only 1% get external funding. And that's funding from a bank or some other institution. And even I actually think that's even a smaller number because banks most often will ask for a personal guarantee. And so they're asking for a personal guarantee. So they're not really funding the business. They're funding your ability to pay back the loan when the business fails. And then there's so much about venture funding and angel investing. But when you look at the GEM report, 0.15% get venture funding. That's 1 in 1,000. And then when you remove sort of the high tech and the sexy businesses and focus really on Main Street entrepreneurs, it's 1 in 100,000, 1 in a million that actually get funding. And so unfortunately, we spend a lot of time focused on venture funding and angel investing and pitch competitions, but it's really not how Main Street entrepreneurs get their businesses going. And so back to the how to do it. The two most famous axioms in entrepreneurship is quick wins and fail fast. And so if you focus on these axioms in your developing your idea, you are more likely to be successful. And so when you look at these well-known brands, we all know how they ended. But when you look at their origin story, how they started, they used the quick wins, fail fast, and they started really, really small. So here's my first case study. Nike, we know how Nike ended, $1 billion, $40 billion company. But what's important really is how they started. The initial order was 15 pairs of shoes from Tiger Shoes in Japan. He sold them out of the back of this VW camper, and his initial name of his company was Blue Ribbon Sports, because what he did is he ran track at Oregon State, and you get a blue ribbon for getting first place. And that was the original logo of the company. When he came up with the Nike logo, it's this one, and he paid $35 for it. Start small. If it had failed, he had basically had 15 pairs of Christmas presents for friends and family, right? So it wasn't big. It was only later after he realized that it was working that he saw the potential of growing this into something more. And so how do entrepreneurs start? Incidental, accidental. You develop from an interest you have. Students are doing activities and something interest grows into something bigger. As you're solving the problem, other people gravitate to it because you're solving the problem. The other approach is opportunity focused. People are focused on, okay, what's out there in the market, changes in technology, changes in community, in society, economic challenges that create these opportunities, right? Neither one is better. They're just a different initial starting point. And in my experience, rarely do passion projects ever become anything. And so when you're thinking about innovation, there's sort of 3 elements to it. It has to be a viable business idea. We've all had people selling products and services that they're actually selling it at a loss. They're losing money. It has to be technologically feasible. Unless you can build an app, it's not technologically feasible for you. So you got to be able to technologically do it, and it has to be desirable by the company. All those three elements combine and make this experience innovation that people will want to buy your product or service. As you're thinking about entrepreneurship, it's important to differentiate it from business management because entrepreneurship isn't management, and managers are promoted, recruited, rewarded for their ability to do these four things: organize, control, plan, and lead. Managers love to lead groups. Entrepreneurship is really the polar opposite. And so while managers love to plan, entrepreneurship functions in uncertainty. We do not know if our idea is going to work or not. Managers love to organize for a predetermined outcome. We want to, increase sales by 10%. We want to reduce costs by 5%. But an entrepreneur, we don't know what the outcome is going to be. There's multiple possible outcomes. Entrepreneur or managers focus on controlling the process, and entrepreneurship functions in a state of chaos. To the outsider, it's disorganized and chaotic, but the entrepreneur inside is able to connect those in a unique way, and they see that new pattern, that new solution. And then managers love to lead. And then within the entrepreneurial process, you need autonomy. The entrepreneur needs the freedom to follow their ideas, follow their gut instinct of a new solution to solve a recurring problem. And so Michelle will laugh at this because Harvard's definition is entrepreneurship is the identification of opportunities, pursuit, exploitation, independently of the directly controlled resources. And so when I used to teach at Harvard, this is the definition they gave me. And I liked it, but it was missing something. And so this is my improvement on Harvard's definition. Entrepreneurship is the development of ideas into opportunities, pursuit, exploitation, independently of directly controlled resources. And my improvement, what my improvement does is it puts the onus, the focus on the entrepreneur to develop the ideas. Because we've all had the experience where we had an idea and then a few years later, somebody else takes it to the market. So it was an idea for us, but it was an opportunity for somebody else. And we'll look at what differentiates ideas from opportunities, but really it's about doing the work to develop the solution, right? And so you have to do the work. No one's going to do the work for you. And so as I'm looking at sort of what are the behaviors of successful entrepreneurs, there's really 7 behaviors of successful entrepreneurs. Habit number 1 or behavior number 1 is granular. Keep it simple and stay focused. And so this is what I mean by granular. People will come in and say, oh, I want to solve poverty in the US. That's such a large level that the government can't solve it with all the money they have. Organizations, large multi-billion-dollar organizations can't solve it. So you want to go down a little bit lower. The soup kitchens, food banks are sort of the industries that are designed to solve that problem. That's still too big. Micro-organizational level, there's organizations called mustard seed and other soup kitchens that are designed to help at front lines. And that's still too big because we don't want to change an entire organizational structure on an idea that may or may not work. And so when saying granular is like every weekend we have a team together and we have problems A, B, and C. At a granular level is pick one of those problems and try to solve it. Use the Pareto optimal approach, which is which problem is either the easiest to solve or which of these granular problems has the most negative impact on it. Solve those and then work on the next one and then the next one and the next one. And if you're able to overcome this recurring sticky problem on your weekend's food service, you can then move it into the department, then into the team, into the organization. So it's really a bottom-up approach. Entrepreneurship is really a bottom-up approach, and it can't be dictated by, the manager or the owner of the organization. So the second habit or behavior is this affordable loss concept. And the way affordable loss works is don't focus on the money you will make, the upside of this idea. That's sort of that 1% fallacy where I only need 0.1% of the billion-dollar market and this idea will be successful. Affordable loss means focus on the downside. What is the least amount of time and money you can spend to develop your idea? It's the fail fast before you spend time and money on an idea that's not going to work, right? So within the sprints that we're going to propose, and I do, it's spend 4 to 6 hours. That's a lot of amount of time that you can do. If you lose it, you've only lost 4 to 6 hours, not 6, 8, 12 months planning something. And so this is how I envision affordable loss. This is still the diffusion of innovation model. To the left of that dotted line is the entrepreneurial process. You're looking for a repeatable and scalable model. And so you have a fixed amount of money. You don't want to be a zombie and blow it all on one attempt, because then you're stuck trying to figure out how to fund the second approach. This actually, Michelle, this was actually a case of a student in my Harvard class. He came to me, but he actually had $250,000. He was in the tech field. He was about to retire, telecommunications, he was about to retire. He wanted to invest $250,000 in this business. And I said, pause, take my class. And then after my class, he wanted to hire me personally. And I said, after the class, if you really want to do this idea, you can gladly hire me. And so during the course of the class, instead of spending $50,000 once, and if you get it wrong, you're lost. And we've seen this all the time where people will open a restaurant without knowing anything about a restaurant, buy some vehicles without knowing anything about the business that they're getting into, because it's sexy to buy a vehicle, to point at your staff, point at inventory, because you can pretend to be an entrepreneur. There's action going on, and we thrive on this action. So the way the affordable loss concept works is, instead of spending 50,000 once, spend 5,000 10 different times, or spend $500 a thousand.
John, you froze.
What's that? And so the idea is, I promise you, long before you run out of money, you'll determine whether there is a repeatable and scalable model. In other words, whether that model is going to work. And then what we're trying to do is extend the time before you run out of money to figure out product market fit. And so back to that case of the Harvard student, he presented the idea to me, I knew it was a bad idea. If I told him it was a bad idea, he would have ignored me and moved on, right? And so he did these affordable loss concepts through the sprints that we do, these 7-hour sprints bi-weekly. And after about week 7 of the semester, he came to me and said, John, this idea is not going to work. So essentially, I saved him $240,000 on an idea that wasn't going to work. And the other part that hurts me is that he should have given me some of that money. But he was able to learn and take that and save that for something else. So I feel really good about that. I don't know if you remember who it was, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if he was in your class or in your section or not. But anyways, what affordable loss does is, through these concrete experiences, you build routine, you build discipline, personal, business, and with your money. And this is what we want to do, right? So that's one of these soft skills. For people that have existing businesses, what I tell them is, you're up here at the top of the world, just like the movie Titanic, and you need to devote 2 Fridays every month. So every 2 weeks, a Friday afternoon, devote time and effort to destroy your business model. And the reason is that you're not destroying your business, somebody else is going to come up with a new idea to replace your business. And so if you've had a business for 5, 10 years, it's changed dramatically over that period of time. So you have to keep innovating to be on top of the next curve. And what you want to do is ride the next curve, right? Ride the next opportunity so that your business remains relevant. So habit and behavior number 3 is pilot the plane. What it does is it builds agency and autonomy, self-directed learning. So you have to do the work. No one's going to do the work for you, especially when you're starting out, when you don't know really how you're creating and capturing value. It's easy to hire somebody, but if you don't know how to explain it, you're just going to waste money, right? And so you shouldn't hire people. You can collaborate, but I encourage people not to hire at the beginning. Try to do as much as you can yourself until you figure it out. It builds agency and autonomy. And the research on luck, you look around, you see people that are lucky. There's actually research on luck, and we know there is such a thing as luck. So if you look around at behaviors of lucky people, is they show up, they work hard, and they come prepared. Those three things will make you lucky. So um, people that are unlucky don't show up, don't work hard, and don't come prepared. The bird in hand principle, bird in hand is worth two in the bush. In Latin America, they say it's worth 100 flying. So um, what the bird in hand concept and behavior focuses on is focuses your attention on what you actually have and can do and not what you can't do, right? So if you focus on what we lack, it will paralyze us. So focusing on the bird in hand builds this growth mindset. So as you're in the entrepreneurial space, you hear a lot about entrepreneurial mindset, growth mindset. I mean, a growth mindset is focused on what you have and build from there. The lemonade principle is the life gives you lemons, build lemonade. Those bad experiences, those failures build grit and resilience. And so we want, I don't want you to have a failure, but you need to have a bad experience. You need to have a concrete experience. It doesn't matter if it's a success or failure. You need to have these concrete experiences because it get built, and the failures build grit and resilience. We learn more from failures than we do from successes, right? Behavior number 3, 6, and focus is crazy quilt. One of the fundamental and really the most important part of entrepreneurship is who you are and your lived experience. And so your context is from your context that all ideas emerge, right? And so what this crazy quilt allows you to also do is look for collaboration and cooperation because you have resource constraints, you have capacity constraints, you have knowledge constraints. And so cooperate with people to build a better quilt. Other people will collaborate with you if what you're doing is interesting and what you're doing is interesting to them. And so what it requires of you is to be vulnerable and ask for help. In other words, talk about the challenges you're having and then also offer help for people that are having challenges on something that's really simple for you to do. And what that does is it builds autonomy and agency. And so habit number 7 is its iterative process. And so we don't learn from experiences by doing things. They're necessary, but not sufficient. And so you need to have these concrete experiences attempting to solve the problem. We learn by reflecting on those experiences, and it gives us iterations. We can pivot, or we can make small changes, or we can pivot. We can realize that this idea is not going to work and then change it to something else. And so what we want to do over time is get our idea and align better with what the market actually needs, because the more aligned our idea is with the market, the more successful we're going to be. And the reflective process is what we need to build new knowledge, right? Because if we don't have these concrete experiences, we're going to just base all of our assumptions on hypothetical thinking, right? Instead of real market feedback. And one of the things I love about entrepreneurship is it's a pure science. It's like biology and chemistry. The only difference is our laboratory is the market. And so we want to take our ideas to the market to see if there's interest. And so really, when you look at these behaviors, what we end up actually doing is developing these soft skills, right? The work ethic, accountability, problem solving, teamwork, communication, time management, compassion for the people that are having problems and how our solution will help solve that problem. Grit and adaptability, because our initial assumptions are not going to be that well aligned with what the market needs. And so we have to be willing to adapt it. And I say, I don't want you to be in love with your idea, be in love with solving problems in the community. That's what you want to be in love with. And that allows you to be adaptable. Like I said, I'm a professor, so I actually do a lot of research on this. And so when we focus on theory-based business plan writing, business model, lean launchpad, all this hypothetical coursework, we end up with a paralysis. But we can actually research it. And the research shows that there's what I call a flat line. Students are no more interested in entrepreneurship after doing those hypothetical type courses than they were, except in Spain, where they're actually worse. They're less likely to be interested in entrepreneurship. Don't know why. I guess they have less grit and resilience. But when you look at problem-based approaches, sort of these concrete experiences, what we see is this statistically significant increase in students' intention. And we actually see this in their actions. Their attitudes go up, their subjective norms go up, their perception of behavioral control. In other words, if I want to do it, I'm going to do it, and their intention. And one of the greatest joys I had when teaching at Harvard is every semester somebody would quit their job and start their business. It's not what the employer wanted when they paid the $4,000 for them to take the class, but they used that class to test and validate their ideas. And so it gave them the opportunity to do something different. And so how do you develop these ideas that we have into viable business opportunities? Like I said at the very beginning, wouldn't it be amazing if it was just some simple steps? It's actually 10 simple steps. And so for you that are entrepreneurs, as I present this, think about your own experience. And if you have an idea, walk through these steps because these are the 10 steps that will take you from an idea to a viable business opportunity. Through iterations, what we want to do when I teach undergrads is I do a 4 to 6 hour sprint weekly. When I teach graduates or when I work with private sector individuals, it's still a 4 to 6 hour sprint, but it's biweekly because people are working and they're professionals. And so the idea is that you go through this cycle on a biweekly basis. And so back to the original definition of entrepreneurship that I gave is innovation. The first 5 steps will walk you through the innovation process. And the second 5 steps, 6 through 10, are the commercialization, the proof of market. Okay. So there's a problem and you have an idea to solve that problem. That's the initial component of it. And we said ideas are necessary, but not sufficient. And so what the entrepreneur does that's different than everybody else, most people will come up with the idea and then forget about it because they're not willing to spend the time and effort to solve the problem. They adjust their life to this problem. It's not worth their time and effort. The entrepreneur is different in that we will come up with ideas to solve that problem. It's meaningful enough to solve that problem. And so systemic thinking is the next step of the process. Systemic thinking is really, in the research, it's called, researchers sometimes aren't very creative, connecting the dots or pattern spotting. And so to the entrepreneur, the world's in chaos, and we're able to organize the same elements in a new pattern to attempt to solve the problem. And so what I ask people to do is just for a second, or create a pattern with those 5 dots. Connect the dots. And this is that crazy quilt your context. Everybody connects the dots in a different way, right? So when people don't believe your idea, it's because they haven't had your lived experience. And I get a lot of joy out of teaching entrepreneurship where students start with very similar ideas, but at the end of the semester, they've developed completely different because of why they did it and how they're doing it in their lived experience. And so one of the things I will say is when you present your idea, it's impossible. When you talk to your family and friends about it, it's impossible. But then when you actually get it done, everyone will say, oh, that was obvious. And so the entrepreneur doesn't get credit for developing novel ideas, but that's okay because we thrive on solving problems. And so the next step, so you have that idea, you see the pattern. Step number 3 is you have to do the work, your knowledge, skills, and ability to solve the problem. So, and it's okay if you lack the resources, right? But you have to put in the sweat equity. This is when exploiting networks comes in. Your network has a solution for the challenges you have. So you remember earlier I said you talk to an entrepreneur and he's always talking about money to run away because they haven't been disciplined with their money, they won't be disciplined with yours. But when you're talking to an entrepreneur and they're always talking about the idea, but not about money, what they're doing is a form of marketing. They're trying to get help in solving this problem. And the way these networks function is that if your network sees you spending time and effort and struggling to solve this problem, they will step forward with solutions. And we know from the research your network's network has a solution. But if they only see you talking about the idea and not actually working on it, they will not help you. They have to see you struggling. They have to see you trying because we don't want to use our social capital to help for someone who isn't really working on it, isn't really working on the idea. And then that gives us to the so what, which is really market differentiation. So what? Can you substantiate your claims? In other words, can you prove to the customer that you really come up with something better? As you're presenting your idea to people, does it resonate with them? They're like, oh yeah, I never thought of it and it makes sense. And the third one is differentiate. Are you sufficiently different that you're going to change someone's behavior from what they're currently doing? And this is where a lot of nascent entrepreneurs make a mistake. What they decide to do is that they're going to be the low cost, high quality provider, which is almost impossible to do. And we know from the research is that we don't want to attract the customer that wants the product 50% off because they're not loyal to you. They're only looking for the best deal. We want the customers that want better, faster, stronger. They want a better product, better experience. The early adopters are willing to pay a premium for a better experience. And the part of the market differentiation is how can you make your product better so people will pay a premium? But oftentimes you're not stealing customers from somebody else. You're bringing other people that aren't in the market, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's better enough, a superior product that's now going to enter the market." So you're creating a new market for your product. And so when you're looking at those two options, focused on price typically is a losing strategy. So people that remember back in the days when Walmart first started, they were the low cost, always low prices. Someone's always going to do it lower. They've abandoned that. There's all sorts of businesses that do it cheaper. And so market differentiation is really the innovation rents that allow you to develop a profitable business. And so there's your proof of concept. You develop your innovation. It might take you, you might already have it, or it might take you a few hours to do. What I want you to do, if it's something more complicated, break it down to something that you can develop because we want you to test it in a week or 2 weeks. We don't want you to wait 6 to 8 months. And I show this picture of the very first time I sold at the market, my very first selling attempt, for two reasons. One, to show you how bad it was. The second one is for you to think about if you don't feel that your product is good enough, remember about this picture and realize that you're doing it better than the professor. And so from an entrepreneurial point of view, we don't believe in minimally viable products. That term, actually, I have a visceral response to it because this wasn't the minimally viable product I could do. This was the best I could do. It wasn't very good, but it was the best I could do at the time. And so it's version one. And so when you don't feel confident and you don't feel it's good enough, it's better than what I did when I first started. And the market's really amazing in that over the iterations, you can get better at it. Step 6 through 10 are really the commercialization. And so we focus on these initial customers. 87% of ideas come from a problem that we have at home and at work. So you really only have to look at the mirror to find your ideal customer. And so our initial customers are friends, families, and fools, as opposed to 1% of this market, who are the first 5, 10, 15 people that are really going to buy your product. Once you've identified those initial customers, then you know how to reach them. You reach them through these channels. It can be a club, it can be a church, it can be door to door, it can be table at fairs. It can also be online with Facebook groups, Instagram, TikTok. But you have to know who your initial customers are, and then you can join a channel where you think they're going to be. Entrepreneurial marketing is really that low cost, no cost message that you get out there. And so we need a good product, and we need people that are willing to hustle with some basic marketing tactics. And so when you look at the big companies, they don't focus on buy one, get one free. They don't focus, well, the great ones, right? I'll go back to, if you're looking at the food industry, McDonald's spends a lot of money on marketing and promotion. And the reason is that they're not in. The quality of their product is bad. It wasn't always. They used to be a great. And so the model is when you have $4, it's 2 in the morning, and you're drunk, you're going to go to McDonald's. And we know from the research that people will only drive 5 minutes to go to McDonald's or walk 5 minutes. So if it's 6 minutes, you'll find a different option, right? We want somebody that's going to drive to a different community to your product or service and drive by 6 or 8 McDonald's, 6 or 8 of your competitors to come to you because you're better, faster, stronger, not because you're cheaper, lower quality, bad service, right? And so when you look at entrepreneurial marketing, 80% of companies' efforts are focused on building a tribe. And I came up with the acronym AEIOU. So call to action. How do you inspire your customers to take action to solve a problem that's meaningful to them? How do you educate them to make them smarter? How do you inspire them to feel better about? How do you do something that's outrageous and funny? And how do you do things that are useful? So we'll see the outrageous and the funny one abused by a lot of companies. We all know the Liberty Bibberly commercials, but the joke doesn't have anything to do with the product. And so they have to do it multiple times over and over to get that impression. Entrepreneurs, we don't have the resources to that. So, but if you align the joke with the business, you will have much more impact because people will remember the joke. And then only 20% of the time is actually selling. And when you look at the really successful brands, they spend 0% of their time actually selling. It's 100% building a brand. So here is let my racket do the talking. What's interesting, it's not Wilson, right? This is Nike. And people will buy Nike shoes of, who never run, never play tennis, but they want to be part of that tribe. There's Red Bull on what they do. They do all sorts of crazy things. Obviously, the people that drink their product, and what they've done is the little surveys so that people can engage with their posts, right? And then Chick-fil-A, the most profitable chain of restaurants. People will wait in line for that. They're talking about happy. You see their posts. They do have some product posts, but most of them are about being happy and being part of the summer and enjoying life. That's what they focus on, right? And so nowhere are they trying to sell. And so the idea is you want to have a conversation with your customer about the belief system, right? That you are advocating. And so after you start having this conversation, it becomes really easy to sell to them because people are self-identifying that they're interested in your product or service. And so we get back to the initial customers we mentioned were the 3F, friends, families, and fools. And so what we have is, again, friends, families, and fools. And so your mother's love is sustainable, but it's not a sustainable business model unless she's rich and then, right? Your friends will buy the first time because they're your friends. The second time, they'll leave you unread. And the third time, they won't even open the message, right? They supported you because of your friends. And so that leaves us with the fools. And when I do it in Latin America, they have a really hard time with calling people tontos, fools. They're like, no, that is such a. But anyways, the idea is that they didn't know you, and they still were willing to take a chance on you before you were really good at it. So when you look at reflect back on my photo, there was people I didn't know that went up to it and said, "Oh wow, this is some interesting things. I'll spend my money to buy the product," right? And that's the fool. That's the relationship. That's the sustainable business model. And then when you're thinking about effective selling, what's amazing is that we actually don't convince people to sell, to buy. They convince themselves. And because the world's really complicated, we take these shortcuts. And the shortcuts we use to make a decision to buy or not buy are based on authority, scarcity, consensus, consistency, commonality, and reciprocity. And so how do customers convince themselves? It's called the science of persuasion. Consensus, social proof. If everybody's doing it, you should do it, right? And so we will wait in line at a food truck festival for the food truck that has the line. We will not go to the place that has no line. because everybody else is telling it, right? And so when you start your business, it's really important for you to get those Google reviews, get those Yelp reviews, because when we are looking for something, we all go online to see what the reviews are, right? And so it can be a physical line that shows consensus, or it can be online presence that's showing that other people like what you're doing. So work hard to get those initial reviews to show the social proof. Scarcity is this one, do not abuse it. It's easy to abuse it, to pretend that there's scarcity when there really isn't. I'm going to pick on McDonald's again. Limited time McRibs, but we know that every year they're going to bring them back, right? So use it if there's real scarcity, but don't abuse it if you don't really have scarcity, because your brand, you are your brand. And if you tarnish it by pretending, lying to the customer, they're going to know.
Ask a
Reciprocity.
question on that, John.
Yeah,
Is that kind of like what Taco Bell does? Like how they bring things in and
exactly.
take them out? That kind. Okay,
Yeah,
all
don't
right.
do that. What I'm saying, don't
Don't
do
do
that.
that.
Yeah, don't do that. But if you're doing an event and there's only 5 spaces left, it's perfectly legitimate to say, I only have 5 places left. But if you're going to do something and say limited time only, but you plan on doing it again, then you're lying to your customers, and
People will feel betrayed.
they
Like,
will feel
okay,
different.
I
Yeah,
get it. Okay,
yeah.
thank
So
you.
that's what you don't want to do. You want to have this honest relationship because you want to be the authority that they trust, right? Source social norms. Do something nice. We see this at food courts at the airport all the time. They'll give you a free sample. If we don't know what we're going to do, we'll buy from somebody that did something nice, right? And we see this online with companies offering you free 30-day trial of software, the freemium model, right? So what can you do that's nice to people so that when they are making a decision, they'll follow you, they'll buy from you. Authority. When we don't know what we're going to do, we look to someone in authority. And the way I present it is people are sheep and they want to follow the sheepdog can guide them where they want to go, right? And so we don't know what we're going to do. We're going to follow the sheepdog. And that's different than consensus, right? Consensus is the action of others. Authority is follow you because you know what you're talking about, right? Consistency is people behave the same way today that they did yesterday. And so how can you align your product with people's nature to behave and act and believe the same thing? And so one good example is not that you're going to provide a consistent service. It's about your belief system is aligned with theirs. And so one example is when you go to the grocery store, there'll be organic or fair trade bananas. And that signals to people that this product aligns with the belief system that organic bananas are better than regular bananas, or that fair trade is giving a fair deal to the producer. To other people, when I see the label that says organic, I think it's 50% more expensive and I avoid it. Right. And so not everybody's your customer. You want to focus that message on the people who are, in fact, your customers. Right. Because you want to align that belief system. You're not selling to everybody. Commonality. If we don't know what we're going to do, we look to people who are similar to us and buy from them. So the idea is many of us are doing projects because it's a problem that we had or an experience that we had. And so it's okay to share why you're doing it. What you're doing is less important than why you're doing it. And that story about why you're doing it allows you to connect with people in powerful ways. So I've had people do body image things because they suffer from anorexia nervosa, right? I've had people do cake and pastry businesses because they're immigrants and they wanted their family to have a traditional Puerto Rican birthday party with the bright cakes. And so for that community, it makes sense. For me, I might be just as willing to go to Walmart and buy a cake for $9.99, right? So what do you have in common with them? And so that's the effective selling. So now we're at the feedback element. Feedback is all the information you get directly and indirectly from the customer about the satisfaction they feel with your product or service. And the way to think about it is that you've taken your idea, you've taken it to the market, and if you take it there and nobody buys, the market's telling you something. Either you have the wrong product or you are approaching the wrong customer. In other words, you're in the wrong market. It's easy enough to fix, but we don't know until you test those assumptions. So you take it to the market and somebody buys the first time and won't buy again, the market is telling you something. They tried it, but it wasn't valuable enough based on what you had to pay or the acquisition and usage costs for them to come back. And if somebody buys the first time and comes back the second time, it's telling you something that the product was really fantastic and you have some real alignment. And so back to the effective seller, we have friends, families, and fools. We're focused on the fools. And I have to say this, I'm a little embarrassed to say this. When I teach faculty how to teach entrepreneurship, this is what I'm famous for. They're amazed at this, right? The more successful you're going to be, the bigger the alignment is between your idea and the customer needs, right? And so through these iterative processes, you focus on increasing the alignment. And so when you ask entrepreneurs, how do you know the idea was really working? The consensus is when people I don't know are coming to buy my product or service. And what that's telling you is that your initial customers liked your product or service so much that they are telling other people that this product is really worth buying, right? So that your your initial customers become your prime advocates. And so this is the DYME 10-step process. You develop your innovation, and then what I encourage people to do is immediately take it to the market to validate it because we want market validation of our ideas. And so in reality, the steps are simple and easy to implement. And so as you're thinking about it, and don't overcomplicate it, and use these short sprints to validate the ideas. Any other questions or comments? That's sort of the end of my presentation.
I will say that you were talking about, people leaving after I'd taken your class. Right after that, I did leave corporate. And so it's been like 5 years now. And going through that class and going through the steps and then being able to validate the idea, I just knew we had something. And I would say that I have not done a very good job of failing fast, putting too much into the front end. But it's iterated enough now that a lot of clarity on exactly what we do, who we work with, who fits, why it matters to them.
Yep.
So yes, it works. The full process works. And I think for me, it was hard to let go of things and be willing to move on, because I would just try to hold in too long, even though the feedback wasn't there. The things we were measuring wasn't. So anyway, it's been extremely helpful.
Yeah. So over time, you get clarity, right?
Yes.
And you have to. And one of the things I do when I was teaching at Harvard is because it was mostly corporate America and big companies. I would say blame the professor. Tell them because it was a crazy idea, right? You come up with a novel idea to solve a problem in corporate setting. There's a reputational damage, right? And so I would tell people it's your professor from Harvard and blame it on me. If it doesn't work, blame it on me. And if it works, perfect, take all the credit. And so I've had people that worked at a BMW that were struggling with an issue for 18, 24 months. And in an afternoon with one of the tools, they were able to solve the problem. And so part of it is letting go and letting go of your assumptions, and then just be vulnerable, because entrepreneurs have to take a risk, right? You have to be able to look foolish if it doesn't work. Any other questions or comments?
I do have a question though.
Sure.
On monetization, and when we're thinking about pricing and those types of things, is there any guidance you would have around anything that you would share around that part?
So really, when you're thinking about pricing, I talked about sort of there's cost-based pricing, right? So look at what it's costing you. Typically in the food industry, you want it to be a third, right? And then you just triple it. But also the market has kind of, when you look at your product, there's a range within the market, right? And there's something interesting that, remember I said low cost, high quality is a challenge. Part of the reason that it's a challenge is the human psychology of it, right? And so we don't trust, like if we're looking at two options and one is higher priced and less lower quality, and one's lower price, higher quality, we're sending mixed signals to the customer. And we would think that the consumer would buy the lower quality, the higher quality, lower price. But what actually happens in the consumer behavior is they buy none, right? And so once the market has established, let's say the price point is, $100 to $125. If you offer it for $50 and claim it's better, no one's going to believe you. And so, what we want to do is put yourself in the same range as everybody else, and then focus on why you can do a little bit better. And that way you don't confuse the customer. And then it allows you to develop something that is profitable, right? Because you don't want to start selling at a loss, hoping that at some point you're going to convert it. One of the funny things in the .com era was we're losing on every item, but we're going to make it up in scale, right? And it worked for Amazon, but for most people, it does not work, especially Main Street entrepreneurs. So yeah, that's sort of my two ideas. And then think about value-added things that you can do. I'm working with a restaurant, instead of offering 50% off for Valentine's, right? Which is what he did. It's a special occasion. What can you add as a premium? So instead of somebody spending $50, they'll spend $75 because it's a special occasion, right? And add the premium because that's where the innovation rents happen, right? Jeffrey?
Thanks, John. Yeah, thanks. I really enjoyed the presentation. So my question is, you did talk about that at the beginning of the business, sometimes family and friends tend to give you sort of not so straightforward information, and because they don't want they don't give you the correct information. So I'm wondering, at these early stages of the business, when you feel that as an entrepreneur, you're having challenges, would you advise one to consult friends and family, or would you want him or her to just try some other external network?
Jeffrey, humans are wonderful people.
Yeah.
And because we're wonderful people, we'll lie to our friends and our family. It's a great idea. That's a lie, right? And so what I'm saying, what I believe is take it to the market, let the market tell you, let the market validate your idea. Because number one, your friend or family isn't going to be the recurring customer. So I'm not a big believer, let's survey them, let's survey our friends to see what they like or if they'll buy it. Let's just go out and initially some of your friends will come by, but don't even think of that as market validation. It's after 2 or 3 times because your friends are only going to buy once. And then how do you get that traction with the real market versus asking your friends? Because Jeff, I think whatever idea, you're a smart guy, any idea you come up with is an excellent idea, right? There's not much value in that statement, in that feedback from your friends. Whereas somebody paying you out of their hard-earned money, or in Taylor's case, because I think you're doing an NGO, right? Bums in the seat. Do people come to your event? Will they come back next time? Will they bring a friend? That's the measure of success, that you're creating something valuable to them. So it's not only just money, but it's engagement of some sort.
Thanks, John.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
There's also the possibility of creating yourself as the midline. I know that a person and I put together an organization that basically goes out and brings the other organizations with us that take care of people's needs. We'll go out with food and water, and we'll bring the food bank with us and those kind of things.
Yeah.
The problem we saw is the original problem was transportation, because people have to go to the food bank. People have to go to this other office. So we brought those people with us.
Yep.
And it sort of left the major organizations in a bind because they weren't the initial contact.
Yep.
And they got angry at us for that. But it's a good model.
Yeah, you developed a new innovation to change the delivery that was impactful.
Yeah.
Right? And so Powerful. Thank you. That's what we want, but there is resistance to change.
That note, I just want to say I really appreciated the kind of direction and guidance to fail fast. I think that's the thing that really does hold so many people back. But the way you put it, where you just don't put everything into one space, so that way it extends your tenacity, your ability to be tenacious and stay on. I really like that. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And what I'll do is I will send the PowerPoints to everybody if you want, and it's all online. All the workshops are online on the website for free. So, and all the material. So normally what I do is I have a worksheet. I'll send that. I have a book. I wrote a book. It's been translated into English, Spanish, Nepali, Malaysian. And then because I'm egotistical, I'm a professor, I would like to write books. And then I realized that it's actually, I'll show you. So there's the book. But I realized it all can be distilled down to a worksheet. But it is front and back. Right? It is front and back. So my whole body of work is one worksheet that I'll send to you and sort of explanations how to implement it. So Taylor, if you have a team of people that are working with you, there's a really nice exercise that I did in my Harvard class called brain writing, is you give them each this worksheet and they work on it quietly in a room together. And you see Michelle's nodding her head. Nobody speaks. Cannot speak to each other. And they write down their ideas to improve. It's something really open-ended question. How do we improve our service provision? Right? And they write down their ideas without talking to anybody. And then the first couple steps of how you're going to implement it. And then this is where the magic happens, or this is what's happening that's powerful. They hand their idea to somebody else, and the other person says yes and. And what it forces the person to do is come up with good ideas. Because we know from the research that brainstorming never worked, but it's fun and exciting and people talk. And what it does is we all know what people are going to say, right? This forces even the quiet people to come up with an idea. So you're giving voice to people in your team that don't participate. And then you're forcing the people that normally, and you do brainstorming sessions, who say, yeah, great idea. From actually, because that doesn't help. It's what is my idea, first of all, and then how do I build somebody else's idea? And after you go through the cycle, everybody presents how the idea was developed. And what's powerful is that there's no ownership of ideas. There's usually a consensus that we all built it. And then it really works in your team is if they go implement it immediately without you having to pester them. Because it's their idea and they want to see it develop. And so your role, if you're the owner or manager, is how can I do it? Not yes, but yes, and. If you say yes, but, you're going to kill the climate of innovation. Yes, but we did it before. Yes, but we don't have a budget. Yes, but we don't have the time. It's yes, and how can I help you do it? Giving them agency and autonomy. And do it small. So if it works, great, you can replicate it. If it doesn't work, you haven't destroyed everything.
We've tried Google Docs and trying to share and being
No.
like, let's, build on things, and then it just
I'll let
didn't.
Michelle, there's a problem with Google Docs. I'll let Michelle, she was going to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that it's like an amazing team collaboration thing as well. And so
Because everybody's busy and
I have
tight.
used it ever since you've taught it to me over and over again in different facets. But my team's always dispersed, so it's really hard that I have everybody together. So what we do is I create an order for the email, essentially. I mean, this may not be the best thing to do,
Yeah.
but I don't want them all putting it in the same time. And it's random. And so then they have the question, then they know exactly who to send it to. So then the person gets the other data and then they're responding to it. But I use this before we have any in-person meetings, just a lot of things just to get them collaborating and requiring them to think differently. And also it just requires everybody to be stepping up and share. And so it's just been like very tremendous.
You
thing.
mean like the email chain thing that you're
Yeah, but I
doing?
tell them
Oh,
how to, so they're all on the email, they get the understanding, but once it goes out, it just goes out that one time. And then that person that gets it, they take the lead, forward it to the next person and they give their feedback. Then it goes the next one. So they follow the distribution separately. And then when I get it back, I have everybody's input and it was not influenced by anyone else. It came to them and they were building on the idea.
Yeah, so
good idea.
the problem with a Google form, and somebody once at the Harvard class people did that. What happens is that you get anchoring bias,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so somebody said something, and now it frames everybody else's discussion because of what that person said. And the other thing that happens is that um, if Michelle says, "Let's just do this on a Google Forms," and she's the boss and she types something, we're all going to agree with Michelle
Mhm.
because she's the boss.
Not my friends.
No, okay. Y'all
They
disagree?
argue with me all the time.
Okay.
But
Well,
but
you're
you're right.
lucky
I can
because a
see what
lot
you're
of people
saying.
don't.
Yeah.
There's an anchoring
Or
bias.
you put
Welcome
the
to
idea or
NPR.
somebody responds, they've got more influence in the group and it just shuts everybody down too. So,
Yeah, that's
um,
true. Yeah, that's true. How does that not happen in an email? And like, so I can understand. Like, if somebody's building off of somebody else's idea, how does that? Maybe I'm overthinking things. Maybe I'm overcomplicating things, which is usual.
I will tell you what I did, but I don't know if Dr. Dobson has another way to do it.
Well, I'm tell you what I think you did is that you have, let's say you have 5 people in the group. Each
Mhm.
person has a different email list, right? So let's just I'll get an email from Michelle with the prompt, how do we improve customer retention? How do we improve the customer experience? And then we all get the same email, and so my email says, I will email it to Taylor.
Yep.
And then
Okay.
Taylor, your email has the same prompt and you build the first one, and then you are going to email it to Robert.
Yep.
Robert has the same prompt and he's going to email initially to Lisa. And then
Yep.
Lisa will email it to Karina. And then Karina will email it to me. I
Yep.
will look at Karina's email and build on what she wrote, and then I will send it to you, Taylor. And then you will build on it and send it to Robert, send it to Lisa, send it back to Karina. So Karina will get 5 isolated people building on the idea.
Okay, I
And then so what
understand.
we've actually all done is we've all built on each other's idea.
Mhm.
That's how you do it, right?
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
This is how you stop what's been going on in entrepreneurialism for a long time, which is, yes, you have brainstorming, that word again, and then everybody crushes it with feasibility before you even get a chance to put it out the door.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's why we focus on yes and,
I
right?
see.
And then at the end, there's kind of a discussion. And what's interesting, there's a discussion, and I'm assuming you just bring people together for a Zoom meeting, and then they
Yes.
discuss, and they're
Yep. We
like,
did.
yeah,
Yep.
go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, sorry. I'm going to just revert from brainstorming for a minute, and I wanted to go back to Michelle and her pricing and something, John, you said during the presentation, which might get passed over, but when you're surfing your company and you are looking at pricing, and John mentioned about spend some time going back and destroying your business. So it's kind of like a self-reflective process where you get your questions ahead of time, you get prepared ahead of time. And kind of the brain writing kind of is a good also tool to use in that destroying your business. So you could ask the appropriate question you want to ask and use it as a tool. But more so like destroying your business is a really great idea before somebody else does it. And you can look at your pricing strategy from that point of view. I just wanted to bring that up because it kind of corresponded with the brain writing
Yeah, no,
in a
definitely. The idea is to create, if you're owner of a company, or you want to create a climate of creativity and innovation, right? And so all the tools that I used in that Harvard class were designed to create this climate so that you actually get collaboration from people. And especially if you're the owner, it's actually the frontline staff that see the problems because things are working for you. You're at the top of that structure. It's everybody else that sees the problem, so you got to give them a voice. And so that is one tool of a few that allow people to sort of have a positive impact on your organization. Excellent. If there's no more questions, I'll stick around if the people have questions. I will send you everyone that was here. I'll send you guys through everyone locked in through LinkedIn, right? I'll send you guys all the presentations. Do you have a question, Karina? No? Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much. It's good seeing you.